And hello, people of the world. Welcome to my channel, Sir Koolzalot. You're cool, I'm cool, we're all super cool. So it's been a little while since my last video, and as you can imagine, I have been very busy traveling. So I finally had a chance to make this video for one of my trips, which was an international trip that I recently did to Europe in May and June, and I was traveling with the X6 Pioneer Pro. So this is the first time I have taken the X6 on an international trip. So I'm very excited to be able to share with you the experience and all the data that I've collected. So without further ado, let's jump on in and let me show you what I've got. Alright, so as always, I do have my usual disclaimers. So my travel journey is a personal quest to find the best travel coolers that are out there for my travel needs. All the data that I've collected is my own. I don't have any sponsorship or affiliations, and so I am just really sharing my experiences and notes with the community, and I hope you enjoy the story. Let's keep on going. So just a little recap. This is some of the marketing materials for the X6 Pioneer Pro from Secrets Box. So I have already posted a couple of videos on the background for this product, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but just as a refresher, it is a USB Peltier plate cooler that has an aluminium heatsink tube fan. It has this plastic cup. It has the usual thermo flask. It comes with a carrier bag, which I didn't use. And most interestingly, it has this sort of onboard battery that sits to the side of the cooler. It has a fairly sophisticated control panel that allows you to control the temperature of the thermal flask pretty precisely. Of course, for most of us, the temperature range of interest is 36 to 46 Fahrenheit. The control panel has the ability to be turned on and off if you want the light to be dimmed at night or on a plane. The control panel also has the ability to switch between centigrade and Fahrenheit, which is handy depending on which country you're in or which temperature scale you prefer. And it also has a power mode that's a little bit more of an art form that is really about the sort of the relative ambient temperature that you're in and how much power you want the unit to expense as it's trying to heat or cool. In fact, apparently it has a heating mode, but I haven't really tried that one yet, so I won't say too much about that. Okay, so let's keep on going. So here's my journey to Europe. So you've sort of seen this one a few times, I would say. So I travel from the Bay Area in California. I always get the connection flight via London Heathrow with British Airways, and then in this case, this trip I was on to Basel, Switzerland. So I have the Euro connection flight. For the getting to the airport, I was using taxis, and then for my trip to Basel, I actually stayed at the Wettstein Hotel this time. So as you know, I kind of jump and pack back and forth between hotels depending on what's available. So I stayed there for about 12 days, so quite a long trip. So I was carrying 2 weeks of medicine with me. Let's keep on going. Alright, so to just give you an idea of my travel setup, don't panic, this looks like a lot of equipment, but I actually decided to take a lot more with me because I wanted to test a few things out. And actually also I was a little bit nervous about an international trip with a new cooler. So I actually also took with me in my checked baggage my beloved X1 Voyager from Secrets Box, which is also known as the Foral family Voyager. So yeah, just a heads up, I actually had a lot of equipment with me, multiple batteries and other things, but if you want to get a quick idea of what some of the equipment was, if you're interested in it, if you are planning to use the X6, then this slide is for you. So I was using the Kemimoto carrier bag, very specifically the 32 ounce sized one. I actually took with me a new travel charger that I hadn't tried before, called the Baseus 70 watt universal travel adapter. So that's what that looks like. I of course also had my Anchor with me, but this was just a US plug, not an actual international travel adapter. Got all my cables. This item here, I will draw your attention to it, the Poi Coat, I think that's how you pronounce that, the 240 watt. It's a little USB adapter, right angle, and note that it has a little LED light, and this will be important later on, and I'll explain why. And then of course, as you know, I really like the INIU batteries, so I've got loads of those. For the main trip I primarily focused on the 20,000 milliamp hour, but for the hotel and other things I also had the 25 and the 27,000 milliamp hour batteries. So as I said, I was doing a lot of sort of trial and testing and stuff. Just a heads up, all this equipment worked beautifully, no issues, as I was sort of trying different plugs on planes and interchanging batteries and trying different travel adapters and stuff. All this stuff worked really well with the X6, so just a heads up. So let's keep on going. So now let me sort of give you a visual or video taste of my setup and what that looks like. So here you can kind of see the main parts here arrayed on the engineering bench. So I'll just sort of walk you through the assembly. So of course the injector pens here are at room temperature. They're dummy pens. They don't have meds in them, so just heads up on that. So here you can see I place the one of the tempo discs into the cooler there. I want it to sit at the top. That one actually also has the pressure sensor, in case you're curious. And then for this trip I was carrying two Zepbound auto injector pens, and as you can see they're positioned in the inverted orientation from each other to fit better. I also there just put a Tempify probe in. I wanted that one to sort of sit more towards the base, and that's basically the sort of the primary setup here for the flask. Note how I attached that plastic cup, but I didn't tighten it too tight, and once it reached sort of the end I sort of shimmied it back and forth just to make sure that it was reasonably loose. The tactic there is be careful not to over tighten that plastic cup because it has no thermal value. It's kind of a holder, and when the unit cools down the plastic will contract a little bit, and it will contract around the aluminium screw, and it will actually be quite hard to remove. So keep that one a little bit loose so it's easy to remove later on, especially if you're going through security and they want to look. So here's the bag, the carrier bag. You can see that it has a nice aluminium, or sort of, I guess it's like a aluminium kind of inner layer, which is kind of nice for reflecting the cold back. And note how that I positioned the onboard battery sideways, so there's a very sort of particular orientation to set this up. I don't want the battery pointing in the same direction as the side pocket for the carrier bag, because I'm going to use the side pocket for the carrier bag for the external power bank. Now here you can see I'm playing around with that little right angle adapter, and then there's that small cable that I like that just has enough reach to run to the pocket of the carrier bag. This is great for wire management. So this is very similar to the setup that I use for the X1 Voyager as well. So there's that's a 20,000 milliamp hour INIU battery. So the sort of the smaller of the three that I was showing you earlier. The bag has a double zipped pocket. You can see there's zips on either side, which is nice because then you can zip right up to where the cable leaves the pocket, so it makes that really nice and tidy. I also was using this sort of medical supply label. It's kind of it has a rubber material. You'll see that on the journey photos that I'm gonna, and videos that I show later on. In hindsight, actually, I don't think this had a lot of practicality, so I probably won't use that in the future. But anyway, you know, it is what it is. That's the setup that I was using. This is this international plug adapter thing, and it has this cool little USB cable that's on a little tether that can sort of get pulled out of the plug and then retract if when you're not using it, so it kind of keeps it nice and tidy. I actually really like that. There's all the other sort of cables that I took, sort of plug this in, and I'll tell you more about these cables a little bit later on, so I'm not going to get too carried away. But note how I have these little USB adapters on those cables. This is important because some planes and airports have the older USB plug models, and some of them have started to modernize. So you want to be careful not to get caught off guard when you're traveling, and have a couple of different options and strategies for being able to plug in. So I like those adapters, those little USB adapters, because it gives me good flexibility when I'm on planes and stuff. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed the quick sort of setup tour. So now let's keep on going. Here's just a photo then of what that looks like from the side, so you can kind of see everything's all set up, ready for travel. And then here's just a quick picture to show you what those extra cables might be used for. You know, if you need to sort of charge the battery while you're traveling, or if you need to charge the onboard battery while you're traveling. Just remember there's a little plug on the side of the onboard battery if you want to charge that directly. So different options, different setups. Alright, so now let's start to look at the actual journey experience. So I'll start with photos, and I'll sort of share some of the things that I observed along the way. So here on the left is San Fransisco Airport. Just got through security. This is kind of a visual of the security system that they have at London Heathrow. This one here is me getting, I guess, at the baggage claim at Basel Airport, so you can kind of see what that looks like. And then here you can kind of see the X6 cooler that's just sitting in the luggage trolley. So let's keep on going. Just show you a few pictures so you can get an idea of the journey, what it looked like. Here's some more airport photos. So this was actually at Basel Airport in Switzerland. I was just waiting in at the sort of the check-in line. Here you can kind of see the cooler. Note my crafty little trick here to hang the cooler from my carrier bag. I would say this might be on the slightly risky side. Be careful about placing your cooler in maybe more hazardous positions. But I practiced this quite a bit, and I know this is actually, although it looks a little bit precarious, it's actually very, very stable and sturdy. So here's me waiting at the gate, and some gate pictures, other things like that, so you can kind of get a feel for that sort of airport experience. This is some of the lounge photos. So here I'm at this one here. I was in the British Airways Club Lounge in San Francisco. These other ones, actually, on the way out, I was in the British Airways Concorde Lounge at London Heathrow. So these are photos of the terrace in the Concorde Lounge. If you're curious, really for most of the lounges, it's just a matter of finding a place to park and then finding a place that has power or plugs. So I really like this chair. I found it, and it had this nice little plug port adapter that was sort of running to the table, and I used it to plug in my power and connect it to the cooler. So here you can kind of see that set up. This is some different views of the Concorde Lounge at London Heathrow. They have a cool kind of lounge area where you can sit in front of a fireplace. Of course, it's the summer, so they're all switched off, but that sort of gives you a perspective of what the lounge looked like. This was quite a unique photo because there was almost no one there, so it was kind of a nice opportunity to grab. And then when you're sitting in the lounge, this one here on the right, actually this is the business lounge at London Heathrow. So they also have cool chairs that you can kind of find, and they've got tables that have little sort of port docking stations and other things. So this here on the right just gives you an example of what I did. The business lounge I used on the way back, and the Concorde Lounge I used on the way out. So yeah, let's keep on going. Alright, and then videos are always nice as well. So I'm going to show you just some videos of the airports and the lounge so that you can kind of just get a feel for how that was. The one on the left here is San Francisco. The two in the middle here are the Concorde Lounge at London Heathrow, and then the one on the right there was early morning at Basel Airport, waiting at the gate. So hope you find those kind of cool to see. Gives you kind of that feeling of what the travel experience is going to be like with the coolers. So now let's spend a little bit of time with the planes. So the plane situation in terms of seat. So on the way out, I was in a British Airways flight. I was sitting actually kind of at the front in the first class cabin. I had a window seat. For the Euro flights to and from London Heathrow to Basel, I was basically in seat, I think it was like 3D or something. So right there, the middle seat is a table tray, which you can kind of see in this picture for the Euro flights if you're in business class. So you basically, there's just one person sitting on either side. Here's some sort of stock photos of what those chairs look like. So let me sort of tell you a little bit more about the on-plane experience. So here's what my chair looked like. This is actually a photo that I took of the chair that I was basically sitting in. So it's quite comfortable. This is the British Airways first class. And then note here how there's sort of a cabinet that's to the side of the chair, and then there's a sort of a container cabinet that's here in this sort of alcove. This one here was actually the one that I primarily used to store the cooler. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that. The X6 cooler was too big and too tall to sit in this cabinet. It was actually a little bit too big for the container here as well. You couldn't close the hatch when it was in, but it was just good enough to kind of make do in terms of takeoff and landing, and sort of find a place to put it the air steward wasn't sort of fussed or noticed. So I'm going to show you this in a little bit more detail now. Okay, so here's kind of a chair view of the seat that I had. So here you can kind of see the setup, the full setup that I showed you, and then note here the wire management situation. So there's an interesting story to tell here. I was having a hard time deciding on what the best setup for this was on the plane, and then here you can kind of see the top view of that container that I mentioned earlier, and then this sort of hatch that it has. And then note here that this the reason this storage bin is important is because it's the one that has the power outlets. So it has a USB, 2 USB power outlets, and there's actually one plug power outlet that sits here. So notice how when you put the cooler in the container, you're actually blocking the power outlet plug, but you still have the USB plugs available, because it has sort of this weird triangle shape. And so the X6 cooler is quite a big unit, so you couldn't like completely fit it in there. You had to sort of jigsaw it in, and then, as I said, it was a little bit too tall that you couldn't close the hatch. But this is where I left the unit for takeoff and landing. And then later on, when we were in flight, I actually just took it out and placed it on the side tray here that you can kind of see. So let me say a few more things about this. So here's kind of you can now see when I try to close that storage sort of stowage or storage bin, you can kind of see that it's the unit's just a little bit too tall, the cooler unit, so it doesn't quite close. But actually, this was how I ended up setting this up for the takeoff and landing. Normally you need this to be closed, but no one sort of told me otherwise, so I sort of left it in this nearly closed position. And then here you can kind of see a little bit more. There's USB plugs there, which I will talk about in a minute. Alright, so I wanted to show you this picture because there was quite a bit of wire management to deal with. So look at this. This was me playing around with how is the best way to set this up. And then here now, look at this storage container. Now that the cooler's out, you can see there's my beloved anchor plug, and then you can see that that's sitting in the plug. And then here you can see the 2 USB ports, and so this is sort of what you get to manage your power. And then the question is, what do you do with this? And then as you can see, I had a lot of different cables for different things, so my wire management situation needed a bit of work. So this was in the scruffy state. And then let me sort of walk you through the thought process. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach powering and charging an X6 cooler. So as you know, there's the onboard battery, and that has its own port, so you can charge the onboard battery directly. You can also plug the power into the unit, which will power the unit, and at the same time it will trickle charge the onboard battery. So that's one thing. The other one is you can simply plug your power bank into the seat or chair, charge it directly. So that's another path. And then again, another path is you can charge your power bank, and then at the same time the power bank can be an external power source to the cooler. You can actually also just plug the cooler directly into the chair power and completely circumvent power banks, except that the onboard battery will always be connected to the cooler, so if something happens, that can actually take over if the power is interrupted. So the reason I'm kind of going through all of this is, as you can see, this kind of a bit of a tug of war with, well, what do you actually do with all of this? And so where I landed with this trip, and I don't really know if this is the best way or the most efficient way, was the main plug with the anchor, I actually used that to power my and keep my phone charged. So I had that just running like that. And then for the cooler itself, what I decided to do was to power the cooler directly with one of the USB ports, which in turn was sort of trickle charging the onboard battery, and then separately to charge up the power bank. Then later on, when I was starting to thinking about going to sleep and stuff, I decided that I didn't like this sort of setup where the unit was just powered by the chair and was sitting with the smaller onboard battery that only had 10,000 milliamps, because if I was to sleep like 6 or 7 hours and there was a problem, actually I really wanted the larger battery to be the one that was sort of the backup. So where I landed with that was, after I managed to charge all the batteries and I knew that they were at 100%, I actually went with this setup. So basically I had the INIU battery plugged into the USB port, and then I had the INIU battery being the one giving external power to the cooler. Now, I mentioned earlier that these little right angle USB adapters were very important, not just because of the angle, but because of this little LED light. So the LED light comes on when there is power. And the reason I like this was because the battery itself is in the pocket of the carrier bag, and you can't always see the display or what's going on. But that little LED light actually basically tells you whether the unit is receiving power from the external power bank or not. Interestingly enough, it's quite difficult to tell or know where the power of the unit is coming from. Is it coming from the internal battery? Is it coming from an external power source? Or is it coming from the battery that's in turn powering it? You sort of follow that train of thought. So the clearest way for me to actually know that the battery is what's powering the cooler is by this little right angle adapter and the fact that the LED light is in the on position, it's lit. And so I actually found this piece to be very, very important for my sort of monitoring and setup, if that makes sense. I think what I would recommend for the manufacturer of this product is actually they should put a little LED on the side here where this port is, and it essentially the LED turns on when it's powered from that port. I think that would be a pretty cool design feature to add. So let's keep on going. Forgive me if that was kind of all twisty, and hopefully that kind of gave you a little bit of a taste. I'm actually honestly not fully decided on the best way to approach that. I'm just sort of expressing how I ended up tackling that with this trip, because this was my first attempt to do an international trip with the X6. And then of course I figured I might as well just show you some videos there as well, so you can at least get that three-dimensional feel. So sometimes just seeing the photos isn't so easy from a three-dimensional perspective. So hopefully those videos there give you a nice extra view of how that all looks. Alright, and then so this here is just some photos of the Euroflight. So as I mentioned, the middle chair is a tray. No one sits here in the business class section. And actually on the flight that I had, no one was sitting in my row, so I had the whole row to myself, which is cool. So here's some pictures of the cooler. It's a pretty big unit, so you can kind of see how much the size and space it takes in relation to a chair. And then for the Euro trip, I mostly had it just sort of sitting under the seat in front of me. Actually, I used the center seat because there was a tray there, and it was sort of, it was kind of more convenient, so I had more space for my legs and feet. So that's kind of a view of that. I did play around with the setup, so I played around with having it under a seat, under the tray of the chair. Here's kind of a little bit of a zoom in of that. The unit being on its side and all that stuff really didn't make a difference. I was sort of checking the temperature probes. As you saw, there was two. There was one close to the lid, and there was a Tempify that was more towards the base. None of those seemed to have any noise or issues in relation to the orientation. So just a heads up on that if you're worried. And then here, note how you can see that right angle adapter. Look at that little light there. Look how nice that is. This is so easy. It's sort of telling me that the unit's this cable is powering the unit, and so I really like this LED thing here. So you can kind of see why. Hopefully that makes sense, because this display panel here just tells you that it's working, but the question is it powered by the onboard battery, or is it powered by the external battery, or has it been plugged in and somehow it's powered some other way? So this little LED light's great because I know immediately that it's the external power bank that's powering the unit, which is exactly what I wanted. I sort of used the internal battery as emergency. So basically it was like, well, if something really bad happens travel-wise, lots of delays and all of that, I have the comfort of knowing that the onboard battery will give me an extra 10,000 milliamp hours. But I really focus most of my trip on the usage of the INIU external power bank. You can put it in the pocket of the chair in front of you, but it's actually it's a pretty big unit. So just sort of a heads up on that. And then here's sort of a side view of it sitting on the tray. So yeah, so hopefully that gives you kind of a feel for how that's going to play out if you're traveling on one of those Euro flights. Here's some more stock photos. So for power management, notice how I had basically a cable running to the port in the chair. Now I noticed one of the ports had 60 watts while the other was just a standard USB. So I actually went with the 60 watt port, and notice how it uses the newer USB plugs. So remember how I said bring adapters for different reasons. Look, there's an older generation USB plug and a newer one. And so actually if you wanted to use that newer one, you were going to need to have the newer USB cables. So something to think about there. Plan your cable management so you can deal with different ages of technologies for USB ports. Alright, and then of course here's a video of that sort of plane and flight, so you can get kind of more of a three-dimensional feel for that. So there's the unit sort of hiding under the chair, and then there's some sort of views from the window as well. You can kind of see how that sort of looks. So it's quite a big call. It's certainly bigger than the X1 Voyager. So that size is more considerable, so you do have to think a little bit about the best way to sort of manage that, where to put it and stuff. But it fits under the chair pretty easy, so that's good. Let's keep on going. Alright, so this now is the plane on the way back. So now here I'm on the British Airways flight from London Heathrow back to San Francisco. And this time I'm in business class, and so wanted to sort of share my notes here. So I've always had this strategy of, so with the A380s, which are the double-decker planes, with British Airways I always go on the upper deck of the business class, and I always take one of the window seats. And the reason why is with the window seat you get this sort of container cupboard that sits on the the right or the left side of your seat, depending on which side you are, and it's really nice in terms of storage space. And actually, depending on which seat you get, you may get 3 of them. So in this case, I actually had 1, 2, 3 of these containers. And of course, now here I'm just focusing on the middle one. And this one, there's plenty of room to drop a sort of a cooler in there and let it stow for the trip. Heads up, if you don't get one of these seats on the upper deck and you just get a standard business class seat with British Airways, the main storage facility that you get is a drawer that's at the base of your chair that looks like this. And just a heads up, I did some sizing of that drawer because my chair had one, but as I said, these upper deck window seats are nice because you get this sort of storage bin as well. But here, look at this picture. Look at how the drawer is quite small in relation to the X6. When I traveled previously with a Voyager X1, that unit could actually fit sideways in this drawer and you could close the drawer. But the X6 is too tall. Now you can put it sort of in an angled position like this, and you would have to remove it from the carrier case and put the battery sort of to the side, and so you can actually fit the cooler in this drawer in once you've jigsawed it into the right orientation. But just a heads up, it is a much bigger unit, and you'll have to remove the carry case and other stuff to be able to get this drawer to close. So my guess would be this would be the best setup if you're doing takeoff or landing and you don't happen to get one of those nice sort of storage cupboards with the upper deck window seat. And then have a look here. Actually, I was using that international travel charger as well. I was giving that a try, and it worked nice and great. You can run multiple wires out of it, and here you can kind of see the cooler sitting on the floor. I tried all sorts of combinations. I tried plugging it in. I tried the USB ports. I tried running a cable to the storage bin, and all of that, and everything worked fine. So this was very versatile in terms of what you could. The different cabling approaches that you could take to powering it up. And so here's sort of just some nice photos there. You can kind of sort of more scenery, so you can kind of see what's going on there. And let's keep on going. So, and I think these are videos. Yeah. So here's some videos if you want that 3-dimensional feel. So one of them sort of looking down into that storage container, and then it's going to kind of lift up and kind of give you a view of the chair and a little bit out the window and all that kind of cool stuff. So as you can see, I really did do these trips, just in case you're wondering. So this is my evidence to prove to you that I did these trips. Haha. All right, so now let's have a look at the hotel. So now we're arriving in Basel, and we're at the Hotel Wettstein. And this is a pretty nice room. I've stayed in this hotel before. You've probably seen this before. And then here's sort of some views of the town, and then some views of the cooler arriving at the hotel and stuff. And so. And by the way, you can kind of see a fan there in the room. It was very, very hot in Europe during this trip, which, as uncomfortable it was, is a great opportunity to test out some coolers. And then notice here how the X6 family is together. So I've got the X6 and then the X1, so a little bit of a reunion there. So as I said, I took the X1 with me as well as a backup because I wasn't sure how well this unit would perform on an international trip. Spoiler alert, it did really well. So I actually never turned on the X1. I had an original plan to do a weekend trip to Italy with the two coolers and to do a side-by-side testing, but Italia Rail went on strike, so my trip to Italy for the weekend got cancelled. So Basel it is. Here you can also see my little hotel tags and labels to let the room staff or service staff know what these are. So I've made videos about that, and as you can see, I kind of keep using them. But the star of the show today is the X1. So let's keep on going. So in terms of the setups, and now kind of zoning in on this sort of alcove at the top of the bed, here you can actually see, as I said, I did actually take two 20,000 milliamp INIUs, one 25 and one 27, so that you can see all the batteries there, and there was obviously one of them was sitting in here. This little alcove had like this bendy light, night light, so I basically bent this light into a shape that essentially created a nice little secure area here where I could store my coolers. And so here you can kind of see the setup. So this is where the cooler stayed essentially the entire time while I was on the trip. I just left it there, and then when it was time to take my dose, I took it out and took my dose, and so on. You can see the two ambient temperature probes here. When you see the data later, there's an ambient Tempify and an ambient tempo disk, and then there was two probes inside the unit as well. So just a heads up on that. Cool. And then I just want to draw your attention to this right angle adapter. Again, look at the light there. And I just really like this because when I came into the hotel room where I wanted to quickly inspect, oh, how's it going? What's the power like? When I saw this little blue LED light, or sort of, I guess it's almost like white blue, I could immediately know that the power was coming from the power bank circuitry. So in the hotel, the setup was I had the international plug into the wall. That international plug ran to the power bank to charge the power bank, and then the power bank had the circuit that went to the cooler to charge to power the cooler. So this setup here was perfect because if there was ever a power problem, the power bank would take over, and the power bank would last probably 12 plus hours. And then on top of that, if the power bank battery ran out, the plus of the X6 is that it has an onboard battery as well, so plenty of power for different problems. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how I approach that. I wanted to just quickly show you Basel temperatures. So on look at this, 90 Fahrenheit, 84, and so on and so forth. So just wanted to draw your attention to that. And then here's kind of a closer up of that power international sort of travel thing. This is the hotel patio. Very nice in the summer here. I used this a few times to sort of hang out, get some coffee, and check some emails. So in terms of the data, temperature data, and all the data for this trip, so as always, the data plots were continuous. In terms of the setup, I had two probes in the cooler, a Tempi probe, and this is the Tempi probe, the Tempify probe, and a tempo disk. And then on the outside for ambient, I similarly had a Tempify and a tempo disk. So that's sort of the technical setup when you see the graphs in a minute. So here's sort of the money shot. So a lot of data, 12 plus days of data here. You can see the positions where I was traveling, so travel, flights, airports, and then everything in between here was the hotel. You can also see how the ambient temperature really went up and up and up and up, and actually on one of the hottest days it was hovering easily in the the 90s to 100 plus outside, and so this is the room temperature. You can kind of see on some instances it was almost going to the 85s to 90 mark. So it's definitely getting a little bit toasty, but not too bad. You can see where I took my dose. You can see the little spikes there. When I took my final dose, I was a little bit more relaxed, so the spike was much bigger. I have a technique to open and close very quickly when there's still a dose in there, so you can kind of see the importance of going reasonably fast to get your dose out and closing the cooler. Some other little blips. Notice here how there was a blip here, and then this one here was packing, but this one here was inspection at San Francisco airport. This one was inspection at London Heathrow, and then on the return this was inspection at London Heathrow. I got secondary inspection pretty much at every security station, so I was debating whether the cooler was attracting more attention because it was a little bit bigger, had more electronics and other stuff, or whether that was just luck of the draw. But in any case, you can kind of see the temperature data plot for that. Even though I had to open up the cooler and they had swabbed the aluminium tube every time, it was able to hold its grounds pretty well. So that was kind of nice to see. So it stayed below that 46 line. On the hottest day, I started getting a little bit worried because the temperature started drifting a little bit more on the really hot days, and then on one of the days I actually was like, oh, I'm gonna put the cooler at level 2 power. So as you know, there's different power levels, and then on one of the days I started noticing that the temperature was drifting more and more up, and I had to go out for the day and stuff, and I got a little bit worried. So I was like, oh, I'm going to leave it on level 2 just in case, and look at what happened there. The temperature dropped very quickly. Actually, I almost ended up going to freezing, and so that was kind of a lucky shot that it didn't do that, fortunately. But it did get pretty cold. So there you have it. Let me show you some of that data in a little bit more detail. So one of the probes actually also measured pressure. That's the graph of pressure. You can kind of see how it changes during the flight. I don't know what to do with this data, but it's sort of interesting to look at. I thought I'd show you that. But this is the one that I really wanted to sort of draw your attention to. This is a zoom in now of what happened to the temperature during one of the inspections at the airport. So the probe that was at the base that I actually had to remove because they wanted to look at the pens to see if they were really pens in there. Obviously the temperature spiked a reasonable amount because I was even holding it in my hand at one point, so you can see what happens there. With the temperature probe that was up towards the top of the lid, you can see that it only really just blipped. Not too dramatic. Nothing really happened there. So it's kind of interesting to sort of see that. But the important news here is just being able to stay below the 46 Fahrenheit mark while you're in storage mode. So, wanted to zone in on that temperature moment that I mentioned where the room temperature was drifting more and more and getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and I was noticing that the cooler was drifting a little bit hotter and hotter and hotter, and it actually drifted from what I was expecting to sort of be that 36 Fahrenheit mark that I really like. So it was drifting upwards, and it almost touched the 40 Fahrenheit mark, which is, still fantastic from a portable cooler perspective. But I was starting to get worried because the temperature was on the up. I actually switched the room fan on. You can kind of see that tamed it a little bit. And actually what I did was I essentially went from power level 1 and I turned on power level 2. So power level 2 gave it a really nice kick. You can kind of see it brought it all the way back down to that sort of 36 mark. Actually it was kind of 35, 36 mark. So you can kind of see the sort of the value power of having the ability to dial in a higher power level for the cooler when you're in more extreme environments. So I thought this was really cool and interesting. The only snag with this is this, I didn't know exactly how this was going to play out. I didn't know that it was exactly going to cause the cooler to drop that back down by about 4 degrees Fahrenheit, that kind of stuff. So this was still a little bit in, I'm going to call it the art form territory. And so a note that I'd made myself here was that I probably need to characterize this a little bit better, exactly how this level 1, level 2 power feature works, but I can see the value of this for really hot climates and stuff. And then here, look at that, look, there was a 90, and then look there was an 89. This part here was on that Friday, so that was where the 90 mark was almost hit. This is the weather temperature. This is my ambient room temperature, the black plot. Alright, so let's keep on going. So really reaching the end now. So yeah, a lot of stuff to share. I hope you found this really fascinating. As I said, this was my first trial at taking an X6 Pioneer Pro on an international trip, and mission accomplished. I was able to take my meds. It was able to protect my meds for the period of time. So, sort of in reflection, review and testing and wrap up, the X6 cooler is a really incredible system in terms of maintaining 36 to 46 Fahrenheit. It is by far one of the best systems that I've ever come across, frankly. So super thumbs up for that. Really good power performance with power banks, very versatile, works really well. The power banks don't drain very quickly. They last a super long time, especially with that level 1, level 2. Now do be careful with level 3 and 4. That will drain your power bank very quickly, within a few hours. But that's for very extreme kind of temperature environments and stuff. Hotel performance was fantastic, no issues there. Thumbs up. I can actually officially say that it survived a European heat wave, so that's nice to know. It wasn't a super hot one, but it survived a 90s Fahrenheit European heat wave, which I think is pretty powerful. Really great power performance at airports, planes, hotel, with plugs, adapters, all of that. So the snags I have, which really kind of put it on the scale between the X6 Voyager versus the X6 Pioneer Pro. It is a heavy piece of equipment. It's when you fully load it with the batteries, the meds, all of that stuff, the carrier bag, it is a pretty heavy piece of equipment, much heavier than the X1. For me, it was still manageable, but I know some people, when they travel, they have very constrained weight restrictions with certain airplanes and stuff, so that could be a point of consideration. So I gave that a thumbs down. Size for the planning, the stowage, the storage on the plane, it is a much more substantial unit, so do be thoughtful about that. Depending on what plane or how you're traveling, you'll really need to think about a good way, where are you going to put this cooler. I would say, rule of thumb, the best place seems to be just put it under the chair. That seems to be the easiest place to store it, in the trade-off of things. But it is a big system. Airport security. So the cooler itself was pretty fine. No issues with TSA or security or whatever. But the snag actually here is that when you have to open the cooler and you have to open up the flask, and then you also have to open up that plastic container, I think there's a little bit of a risk zone there that makes it a little bit clunky. What actually happened with me at London Heathrow was when I went through security and I undid everything and they swabbed the cooler's aluminium piece for bomb chemical tests, I actually slightly nudged and dislodged the connection of the onboard battery, And then I put everything back, and I went onto the lounge at the airport, and then I actually then sort of noticed that the onboard battery had been dislodged, and actually it was not connected to the cooler from a power perspective. Fortunately, because I was primarily using the external power bank for power, it didn't make a difference. But had I only been using that onboard power bank as the method of powering the cooler, I would have lost power. So there is a little bit of a clunkiness to the system in regards to this onboard battery, the quality of the connector, the fact that it's made of plastic parts, and the little sort of snaps are all plastic, and actually it seemed to be quite easy to be able to sort of nudge it out of place and stuff like that. So tip for travel: be very careful of that onboard battery and not sort of breaking it because it's plastic, not putting too much force on it. When I try to open up the cooler, I always hold the cooler from the lid, not from the battery. I don't want to put force on the battery because I'm pretty sure it won't take a lot for it to really sort of snap or break off. So something to think about with that. So I think that I spoke, so airport security, onboard battery, they're sort of hand in hand. So I still sort of give it a bit of a thumbs down for durability, wearability. I think that it can be a very durable system, but you're just going to have to really take care of the fact that there's a lot of plastic pieces, the lid, the body, the battery connectors, all of that are all plastic based, and so that's a little bit fragile, a little bit more fragile than the Voyager. So I think you can get good durability out of it, but you just have to be very careful that it's not as rugged and robust as some of the other coolers that are out there. And then on a final note, capacity is obviously very, very good. So yeah, so there you have it. So overall, I think this is a really good system. Just be careful of wear and tear, handle it a little bit more delicately than the other products, but from a cooling perspective, wow, this is probably the best cooler that I have ever come across up to this point. So what to do with my next trip? I don't know. I'm on the fence. Should I go with an X1 because it's rugged, it's battle tested, it's simple, it's smaller, it's compact, it's easier? Or should I go all in with the Ferrari? This is the Ferrari. I'll have to think about that. I guess you'll have to wait for my next video. So with that, I'm going to start to wrap up now. So I hope you found this all interesting. And just some final plugs. Please join the community if you're interested. We've got the Reddit community, we've got the X community, and we also have the Discord community. So if you want to hang out with some fellow patient adventurers, come and say hello. And then of course I do have a small curated store of coolers that have been thoroughly and very carefully tested, imported directly from China, and they are available for you for your travel purposes. So reach out to me if you have interest in any of these. And as I said, these all get the Sir Koolzalot QC tested stamp. And so that is a wrap for today.